This GeekWire podcast is brought to you by BECU. Stay tuned to the break as Brian Westbrook interviews BECU's Stacy Black for today's Money Hack about financial strategies for navigating unexpected career change. For more money hacks, check out geekwire.com/BECU. Because as you were writing in the book about managing teams of software engineers, I couldn't help but think, what happens when you're not just managing teams of engineers, but you're managing teams of agents?
Yeah, this is very interesting. We were even talking about like LinkedIn being able to list out not only professionals, but list your agents, and you'll be able to hire an agent in LinkedIn. Like, yeah, it's very interesting. I think it will give us a lot of opportunity to use our brains to what we really are here to do, that is change the world using technology.
Welcome to GeekWire. From GeekWire.com in Seattle, I'm Todd Bishop. We are coming to you today from Microsoft's Redmond campus, where our guest is Marcus Fontoura. He is Technical Fellow at Microsoft and CTO for Azure Core. He's worked across some of the biggest names in tech, IBM, Yahoo, Google, and he's now in his second stint at Microsoft, where he's helping to shape the future of cloud infrastructure. Marcus, it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We wanted to have you on the show because you have a new book. It's called A Platform Mindset. It is published by Microsoft's 80/80 Books, and it breaks down how to build scalable systems, support high-performing teams, and create a culture of collaboration. But this book really relates broadly too, so we're going to touch on some of those issues as well in terms of leading teams and the future of AI and where things are headed from here in business and technology. First off, let's start with the name of the book, A Platform Mindset. What is a platform as you define it in the context of the book? And can you give me a sense for the mindset that you bring to platforms and that you hope people who read the book will take away from it?
Yeah, so I think the title of the book was very fortunate because it captures two words that I consider super important. Platform, to me, is a piece of software that encapsulates complexity. And by doing this encapsulation, we can rely on the platform to gain leverage and do more and achieve more. And the other word is mindset. And this is in the mind of the leader, and what are the cultural aspects that you need to have to lead an organization in which we are building and using platforms. Because it doesn't come for free. Like, for instance, once you build a platform to encapsulate some component of your organization, you want people to use that platform. And then what is the cultural transformation that you need to create to allow people to take dependency on one another and to work together so that all the platforms that we build are highly leveraged?
Exhibit A in the book, in some ways, at least in my mind, was in fact Microsoft. In a lot of ways, when Satya Nadella took over as CEO, for example, there were a lot of silos across the company. Can you talk about what you witnessed at the company and its own evolution toward a platform mindset?
That is a super interesting question, because when I joined the company, I was talking even to Satya recently about this. We had Azure as a compute engine, but we had many other teams that didn't leverage Azure as a platform. So other parts of the company were building their own infrastructure to manage the hardware, having their own approach to handle computer failures and so on. And in the beginning, these conversations were very difficult. And when I reflect on this, was a component of maybe the Azure platform was not ready for prime time, and we evolved it over the years. But also there is a cultural component that some of the engineering leaders at the time didn't want even to hear, and a conversation about migrating to Azure and leveraging Azure. And that was only possible when we did the cultural transformation that Satya led. And now we are talking a lot more about how we are leveraging the work of others, how are we enabling others to achieve more and do more. And that what propelled like the fact that we built a great platform in Azure and allowed the other parts of the company to take advantage of that.
it gets into this issue in part that you talk about called technical debt, where you're making decisions early on or at some stage of a company's evolution for expediency. And in the short run, it might be easier, for example, for an individual team to develop its own infrastructure that they build on. But in the long run, if they make the investment in the broader platform and get on board, then they'll be in a much better place as part of the broader company. But this book is not just written for people at Microsoft. It's also written for startups and other business leaders who might be involved with leading companies that include engineering teams. How do you embrace a platform mindset in situations where your resources might not be as vast as they are at a company like Microsoft?
And I think this scenario that you just talked about, that you need this expediency and time to market, is even more prevalent on startups. And of course, if you're in a startup with constrained resources, you want to validate your idea very quickly. So you want to get something in the hands of customers as soon as you can. And of course, most of the startups don't even succeed. So like there is no point in the early stages talking about standardizing things and building platform. But my main point in the book is that as soon as you hit the point that you need to scale, the sooner that you get on board of like, let's create like standardization across the company and a common set of tools, you are better off, because the more you delay this decision, you create more and more technical debt, and this will accrue. And this technical debt is just any kind of debt, right? The sooner you pay, the better you are.
But in some cases, early on, it's good to be leveraged, just to continue the analogy.
Yeah, I think like if you hit the jackpot, it'd be like, okay, I had a brilliant business idea that customers you love, and I'll build it in a way that is very clean, no technical debt, and life is good, right? So like that is the ideal scenario. I would love that like we all lead companies that are like that. Most often than not, people play with ideas until they reach what is the key business success that they want to achieve, and then it's hard a little bit to find that scalable point that like this is the idea that I can just scale out and you'll be commercially successful. And then the longer it takes for a company to get to that point, it's more likely that they will accrue more and more what we call technical debt. And I think there is like these very fortunate cases that like companies might build like a search engine and they'll hit the ground like to begin with, but that is more like a black swan event than the normal case.
Let's take a step back. Who did you write this book for? Who was in your mind when you wrote it? And what are the core inspirations that you hope people will take away from it?
Our industry is a little bit funny because we tend to promote good developers to become engineering leaders. And we all learn in the job, and then there is not too much structure, and then there isn't a playbook like how do you lead the engineering organization, especially at scale. So by doing this over and over, I thought like, how can I codify and create a system that I can teach somebody that is new in this role and is new in this position? What do I think about when I'm leading an organization? What are all the aspects from like managing the teams, hiring the best people, investing on innovation, handling incidents, and how to create efficiencies. Another important part of your previous question that I didn't address that is also a good lesson for engineering leaders is how do you create the resources necessary to platformize? And this is like how do you create the efficiencies with them so that with more efficiencies you can reinvest and innovate more. And so I thought like maybe it's a good time for me to step back and try to put together all the lessons I learned throughout my career in a form that is digestible by new leaders coming in. And also the intention was to help people that are entrepreneurs and then they want to start business and how to think about the role of the engineering leaders that they want to hire eventually.
This is an interesting point. You were asked this question about the broader applicability of the book to business leaders at an event that we just went to at the Microsoft Library, where you spoke with Greg Shaw, who edited this book as part of Microsoft's book imprint, 8080 Books. And You pointed out that it could be useful for business leaders to understand how engineering teams work. And I actually would have answered that question differently after reading the book myself.
I'm very curious.
I think that it's not only applicable to business leaders for understanding how engineering works, but I think there are lessons in this book that can be abstracted for business leaders to apply to other types of teams. And I'll give you an example. You just alluded to this. There's the why career path that you talk about in the book, where you have individual contributors going one way and managers going the other. And there's some crossover that you talk about that can happen later in the career. But that's the kind of thing that can happen in a lot of different specialties. And one of the things that you talked about was how individual contributors can be evaluated and still show their worth to the broader organization. In fact, in some cases, even bigger worth to the broader organization than managers might, even though they're not managing teams of a couple hundred people. So let's just stick with that for a second. How do you apply that in engineering organizations, that whole concept of the why career path?
This concept of the why career path, I think it's something that most leaders don't really pay enough attention to this. And I think this is a key point that if I wanted to stress one thing about the book, I feel that individual contributors, engineers, they are really the heart of the organization. And I think it's very unfortunate that people, they might come in very talented, do a lot of good contributions technically, and then they want to become managers because they really want to be like Satya. And then I tell them, like, really, it's great that you want to be like Satya, but there is one role, and he's already in that role. But on the other hand, there is, like, you as an individual contributor who can be a very influential leader in the company and develop a lot of cool technology. And Satya will not be able to do what he's doing now if there aren't technical people leading this company. And this is a key message that I feel that I wanted to especially newcomers that are new leaders, to think about, that you are doing a disfavor for talented engineers if you convert them to become managers too early in their careers.
Yeah, that applies so broadly to so many different fields, and that dilemma that strong individual contributors face when they want to advance their careers. Management in many fields is just the way they go by default. But at Microsoft, you're actually in one of the roles that pushes against that, which is technical fellow.
Exactly. And that's one thing that I like my role, because I can be like a role model for engineers, and I can say, like, oh, I am very influential in the company. I can have the years of any leader in the company, but my day job is not really managing really large teams. I'm just close to the technology. I'm doing what I love, that is writing code, exploring technology, and that's a very viable career, right? You can be very successful being an individual contributor in our field. That is a good attribute of our field.
This gets into the questions about AI, and I want to talk about that when we come back. We're talking this week with Marcus Fontoura. He is a technical fellow at Microsoft and the author of the new book, A Platform Mindset, and we will be right back. Welcome back. It's Todd Bishop. I'm on Microsoft's Redmond campus this week. I'm with Marcus Fontoura. He is technical fellow at Microsoft and the author of the new book, A Platform Mindset. So one of the things you talk about on the subject that we just discussed, which is individual contributors, is evaluations. You're writing essentially a guide here for engineering leaders at its core. And the question is, okay, here's this individual contributor who's gone off, and it's a senior person. And the question is, how do you evaluate that person in a way that doesn't diminish who they are and what they're contributing? How do you solve that problem?
I think the crux of this problem is what I call the attribution problem. And, like, if I even take my case, my peers, they lead like 1,000 people orgs, and I'm an individual contributor. So when my manager is going to evaluate me and one of my peers, they're saying, oh, this person did 1,000 times more things than Marcus did. But you have to take in account that, like, I'm an individual contributors, and what my peers did not necessarily were all the technical contributions that they listed, because they are listing the aggregate contribution of what their team accomplished. And what they accomplished was really maintaining the team and creating the culture for the team to be successful. They hired the great individual contributors. They fostered a culture of collaboration. They did all these things, but they didn't really write the code. They didn't really think about what are the platforms that they did. They didn't make the technical decision that pivot the direction of the company.
And does that mean that the individual contributor on the whole should be paid at a senior level more than the manager and evaluated at a higher level? How does that work?
I think most in the Valley and in Microsoft, like, we have parallel careers, and I feel that managers are very crucial. They give the direction, they set the culture, and it's impossible for a company to work to work without managers. But it's important that you as an individual contributor have the ladder that allow you to grow as high as you can in your function.
So a lot of what you talk about is managing teams, working as an engineer, and the culture and themes along those lines. How is AI changing the dynamics among the software engineering teams that you've witnessed, and how does it play out in all of these themes going forward?
I think we're in a very interesting time that you see the impact of AI in productivity. And it's really not a revolution. For me, it's more like an evolution, because for the longest time, we've seen the programming languages becoming more and more high level. We're getting much more away from computer architecture and closer to natural language, the way we specify tasks to computers. In productivity, now you can generate a lot of high level and high quality code. So you're seeing a great impact on automating all the bureaucratic tasks that engineers do. And one of the things I like to say, and I said it earlier today in that event that we were in the library, is that when I was in school, I had a professor who said, you can solve the question. When you get to the point that a computer could solve it for you, you can stop. You don't need to solve all the equations. And I feel that's the revolution that we are living in this present moment. You want the engineers to use their creativity, and the implementation and all that can be left to the computers that already do a good job doing that.
In the book, you compare engineers to artists. Can you explain that?
I think most people think about engineering as a mechanical task, and I wanted to highlight that it's a very creative task. And what we just talked about in AI really exacerbates that, because even with AI, everything that's mechanical, the computer will do for you. The AI will solve it for you, but the AI will not decide the direction of the company. The AI will not define which platform you have to build. The AI will not think about new innovations and where we should be investing. So I think it's really this combination of using engineers for what they do best, that is creativity, collaboration, brainstorming new ideas, and using computers for what do they do best. Computers don't get tired of doing calculations, so let them calculate as much as they want in the background while we think about cool problems to solve.
This is a personal book for you in a lot of ways. And in one of the ways that it's personal is the story of the artist whose work was featured on the Brazilian and the Portuguese language version of this book, which was printed first. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so I wanted the book to be understood by people that are not so versed in technology. So I wanted to come up with these metaphors. And the artist is one of the metaphors, and then I have some other metaphors about bikes that convey my understanding of platforms, and also I talk about horses that signify incidents, and there is some stories behind it in the book. And then when I was having this idea about relating creativity engineering with artists, I remember that a long time ago when I was in undergrad, I worked with the son of Cândido Portinari, that he is the most acclaimed Brazilian artist. And I work on the digitalization of his archive. So he's now 85, the son. The dad passed away a long time ago. But the son is 85, and he's still very active and very, very nice guy. And then when I talked to him about the book, he was so excited. And he said, "Oh, you can pick any of the paintings, and I'll donate the rights for you to use in the cover. So that's how it came about.
But you also use the example of his dad in the book, and you explain that if he were commissioned to do a famous painting, which obviously he was, the people who commissioned it wouldn't tell him, hey, put this color over there and shade this over here. And you draw an analogy there to managing high-quality creative engineers.
Yeah, I think this relates a lot to my view of like multiplier leaders. So if I am a leader, I want my organization, if I have an organization of 500 people, I want it to work as an organization of 4,000 people, not an organization of 100 people. And I only can achieve that if I'm empowering my engineers to do their best job, and I'm not micromanaging anybody. And I feel engineers don't really like to be micromanaged. And I like this analogy of like when you are teaching a kid to ride a bike. If every time the kid is going to fall, you go there and prevent the fall, they will never learn how to ride a bike. You are there because if he's going in front of a car, you want to prevent the tragic accident, but you don't want to intervene in every direction because you are not giving the right autonomy for them to learn and grow. And that's my philosophy always has been like hire the best people and give them a lot of autonomy, intervene, advise, mentor them, but let them be creative, let them collaborate because we achieve more that way.
This approach reminded me of another book that I read recently and another guest who was on the show, Dean Carignan, the co-author of The Insider's Guide to Innovation at Microsoft. And he explained how the Visual Studio Code team essentially was created and launched with this kind of mandate. It was basically like, hey, go out there and figure out a way to get web developers coding on a Microsoft platform. It was just this abstract concept. It wasn't do it this way. It was here is your end goal. And it seems like that's the kind of approach you're talking about.
We want to give the engineers the ability to do what they love doing, that is solve problems. And defining the scope and thinking about which solutions to use and which platforms to leverage. This is all the tasks that engineers love doing. And if me as an engineer leader take that away from them, I'm limiting their growth, I'm limiting collaboration, and I'm limiting the impact that my team can have inside the organization.
We're talking this week with Marcus Fontoura. He is a technical fellow at Microsoft and the author of the new book, A Platform Mindset, and we will be right back. I'd like to take you back briefly in a broad sense, just back to AI. How are you seeing it play out for you personally? Are there ways that you're using AI in your job that you think might foreshadow the way that the rest of us might be using it in 3-4 months? Just thinking of how fast AI rolls out these days.
I am exploring a lot AI recently to try to drive more standardization inside the engineering processes we have in Azure. And in Azure, again, is this scenario that we grew very successfully, and we coalesced a lot of teams that didn't work together, so they had different engineering practices, which is great because they were able to get to market very soon and validate their ideas. But now we are working and putting together teams that were not used to work together to collaborate more and more. And we have disparate tools and disparate platforms. And what I'm exploring in my day job now is how can we use AI to bring more standardization, to bring commonality. And it's interesting to see because it's an approach to AI that is different than telling the developers, just go use AI. I am leveraging a small central team to say what we can do with AI centrally to empower a lot of people that are working in the teams.
That's interesting because one of the questions that I have for you is how AI will impact the scale and the size and the scope of engineering teams in the future. Do you have a feel for that?
I think more and more the size of the engineering teams will be proportional to the size of the problem that they are solving. And I think in the beginning it was not like that because you couldn't have a lot of teams because you didn't have tooling to support a lot of teams of 200 people working together very effectively. Now the tools are much better. So if you have a massive problem to solve, like we have to build the new COVID vaccine for the new pandemic, we could have like teams of 500 engineers. And I think we can coordinate them using AI much more effectively than we could coordinate teams of very large sizes in the past.
Because as you were writing in the book about managing teams of software engineers, I couldn't help but think, what happens when you're not just managing teams of engineers, but you're managing teams of agents? And, Satya Nadella has talked about that, this old idea of you sit down and you sort of deploy your agents for the day.
Yeah, this is very interesting. We were even talking about like LinkedIn being able to list out not only professionals, but list your agents, and you'll be able to hire an agent in LinkedIn. It's very interesting. And super excited to see this coming. Is like it will change the way we work for sure. And I think it will give us a lot of opportunity to use our brains to what we really are here to do, that is change the world using technology. And I think the less I have to think about doing mechanical tasks, and the more freedom I have to spend my time doing things that really matter.
In a much more simplistic way, I was struck by another mention that you made of LinkedIn, and that was in the process of recruiting. You explained you might want to be wary of people who seem to have spent maybe a little bit too much time on their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. A long time ago, I was like talking to some people, and then they were saying like, oh, maybe we can build tools to help people grow in their career by analyzing the career of other people in LinkedIn, and
right.
you want to be, and this is all great, right? But then I said like, maybe the other way is just like work and not spend too much time on LinkedIn or in social media.
Yes. Well, we'll just sort of segment that part of Microsoft's business. I'm sure they'll be fine with us talking about that.
No, it's obviously a joke. And then like, I think like, I myself spend a lot of time on the platform because I feel like it's a good platform for like not only attracting new talent, but also to disseminate like a lot of the writings and a lot of the thought that we have on culture and technology.
You left Microsoft for a while, as I mentioned in the beginning. You've now come back. Why'd you come back?
So I'm originally from Brazil, and I had this sense of giving back to my country because I went to school there, but then I came to the US and worked here for 20 plus years and never came back. And the opportunity came to help a Brazilian company, so I went there for like 2.5 years as the CTO. And I think it was a lot of fun for me to reconnect to the country and then to build new connections to understand the state of technology in the country now. However, like on my personal side, it was a little bit too much. Like in just 2.5 years that I was there, I went 24 times to Brazil, sometimes for 1 week, sometimes for 2 weeks. So my daughters were not even recognizing me anymore. And I said, maybe this is a little bit too much traveling. So I always felt like Microsoft is my home, is the place that I built the most fun technology, that I work with the best people. And since I left, I was in touch with people here, and then the right opportunity came to do this work with AI and productivity for Azure, and I was very excited about that, so it was a good opportunity to be back. I'm still helping the Brazilian company as an advisor, and so I'm super excited to be able to have done that.
I understand that asking Satya Nadella to blurb the Brazilian version of your book might have forged a reconnection between the two of you.
Yeah, so Satya and I, we kept in touch. So like I interviewed him when I was at Stone, Brazilian company. We had like a leadership summit there, and then I interviewed him for that. And then so we were in touch about a few things because my company was also a customer of Microsoft. And then when I wrote the book, I asked him to write an endorsement. And then at that time, I was already transitioning off like my role there. I hired a new CTO there. And then like we talk about opportunities here, like at that point.
Well, it's a good entree to a company is to, write a book on their imprint when it was, brought back for 80/80 books and translated into English. It's kind of a unique way to get back into a job you used to have or a company you used to work for.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that Microsoft was starting 80/80 books. At the same time, I was finishing the Brazilian version of my book, and then I did the translation. So the timing worked out perfectly. I couldn't have planned better if I wished.
As I mentioned earlier, this was a very personal book for you, in addition to being a guide for engineering leaders. And one of the things that you reference a couple times in the book is the passing of your wife. and the process that you went through after that and the way it gave you perspective. I wonder if we could just conclude with you sharing some of your experiences there and your thoughts on the kind of insights that the process you went through gave you on your broader life.
Yeah, so when I was in the US for like maybe 10 years, my wife had breast cancer and she passed away in 2007. And at that point, I was like the type of person that would sleep in the office and spend many, many hours working. And then when she passed away, I took a break for like a few months. I went to India. I was very into yoga at that point. So and I always was curious about India. I traveled there for a while. And looking from a distance, my approach to work and my approach to technology was very enlightening for me at that time. And then one of the lessons I share in the book, for instance, is that the work-life balance, for instance, is one thing that I learned that I, like looking in retrospect, I wish that I had spent more time with my family. And even after I applied that to my personal life, I think my years later in Microsoft were the most productive of my life and also the most balanced of my life. So I feel it's sometimes we are so passionate about the work that taking a step back and looking at things from a personal perspective is good. And that's why I wanted to write from that first person viewpoint. And the book is very personal to me.
Well, Marcus Fontoura, thank you for sharing your stories in the book. And thanks for the book, too. As I said, I took a lot away from it in terms of just general business leadership. And so it was very helpful in that way.
Thank you so much, Todd. It's great to be here and great talking to you.
Likewise. Marcus Fontoura is a technical fellow at Microsoft. He is the author of the new book, A Platform Mindset, published by Microsoft's 8080 Books. You can find a link to that on the show notes on GeekWire.com. Curt Milton edited this episode. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with a new episode of the GeekWire podcast.